Welcome everyone to Boston 9/11 Truth Zoom meeting. It's Thursday, September 5th, 2024. And we have a very special guest today, Susan Lindauer. Susan has written a book about her experiences, which I highly recommend you pick up. It's also available in audiobooks. So anyway, this review here of her book pretty much summarizes it, I think. Susan Lindauer is now courageously speaking out about the incredible experiences she claims landed her in prison. She presents powerful evidence that the real reason she was arrested, imprisoned, and declared incompetent was because she knew the US government had clear foreknowledge of the 9/11 attacks and much more. So we welcome tonight to Boston 9/11 Truth, 9/11 whistleblower, Susan Lindauer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan. I've known some of you from years back, and it's good to Susan. It's wonderful to see you again. And one of the highlights of my book tour was a visit to Boston and getting to speak at Harvard Church, in the famous Harvard Church. And I had a great trip with you. I went up to Vermont, and we went to Connecticut and did some really great stuff. Even today, it is extraordinary to me how the government has persisted in hammering at the lies that they tell. And no matter how many thousands of interviews that I have done, Wikipedia has been impossible. We were just talking about this before the event, before this conversation, that it is impossible to change some of the lies that have been told, and people are allowed to fabricate and invent. So here's what I did. I was a CIA and defense intelligence asset for many years, 30 years. Even today, I do intelligence work on a consulting basis. And I've been involved in defense investigations of fraud in the Pentagon, and have captured lots of money. I was never accused of spying in actual real time. This is an invention of Wikipedia. I was never accused of spying for either Iraq or Libya. I never received any money from Iraq, because Lord knows Iraq had no money at all. And what I did was three things that got me in trouble with the feds. One, I negotiated the return of the weapons inspectors to Iraq with Iraq's ambassador that was reported to the White House. My cousin, Andrew Card, was the chief of staff to George Bush. And my CIA handler, Richard Fuse, was next door neighbor to Colin Powell. And that proved that Colin Powell in the White House, the Secretary of State, and the top echelons of the White House were fully informed of every aspect of Iraqi pre-war intelligence. They could not hide at all. And the lies that they had told were extraordinary. The justifications for the war, the soldiers dying, all of these things. The military was hard pressed to confront the real facts of Iraqi pre-war intelligence. The politicians would have been thrown out on their asses, and so they wanted to lie. The second thing was 9/11, and I will focus on the second thing in this talk tonight, which is my advance warnings about 9/11. And of course, we knew 9/11 was going to happen. It's absurd to try to sell this lie all these years later that nobody knew about 9/11. Of course, we knew about 9/11. And the third thing was that I'm going to talk about that tonight. The third thing that I had done after the invasion of Iraq, immediately afterwards, in the first night, the invasion was in March. In May of that year, of the year of the invasion, I contacted the United Nations Security Council, and I advised them that there was already evidence of sexual degradation and torture of Iraqi prisoners of war. And I filed a grievance to the United Nations Security Council. And at the time of my arrest, a couple of things had happened. The president of the United States, George Bush, had announced he was holding a blue ribbon presidential commission to investigate Iraqi pre-war intelligence. And I wanted to tie in Iraq and 9/11 together and all the things that I'm going to tell you tonight. And the second thing was that that at the time of my arrest, that coincided with release of the intelligence about Abu Ghraib and the sexual torture of the Iraqi prisoners. I was literally arrested the middle of March, and by the end of March, 2 weeks after my arrest, they made the announcement about Abu Ghraib. And they did not want anybody to know that we had known all along from the beginning that Abu Ghraib was going on, and it was not covered up. It was actually a widespread policy. The British were doing it along with the Americans, and it was happening at multiple camps, multiple prison sites. So it was not an isolated event. It was widespread. It was a policy decision. I had notified the and so all of those three things, my negotiations of the weapons inspections, but you will not find any of this on Wikipedia. No matter how many times we try to correct the mistakes and the lies and the dishonesty and the deceptions, they just will fight to, they just switch it back overnight. And most of what they have, I think they said that they, at some point they've said, you're accused of spying. I was never accused of spying. And the diplomat had a girlfriend named Susan. So I immediately pointed out that they had the wrong woman. Okay, so they knew within the first 10 days that they had the wrong woman. The woman they were looking at was a different woman. She was the girlfriend of the diplomat. I was working on time-stamped clock. Thank God, I've never been so happy for this. At a lobby firm in Washington, D.C., a boutique lobby firm. And we literally had to hit a punch clock when we went in the morning. We hit a punch clock when we went out to lunch. We hit a punch clock when we came back after lunch. And we hit the punch clock at the end of the day. And at the time, I thought it was just the sweetest. I loved the firm. I loved the lobby firm. I thought it was the sweetest, silliest thing I'd ever done. And then when I was arrested, I was like, thank God for the time clock, because I was then able to prove that I was in Washington, D.C. I was not in New York City. It was impossible. No, they had the different woman, wrong woman. Whether she took any money from the Iraqis, I have no idea. But I certainly did not. And I would point out that Iraq had no money. So that is entirely a lie. But they could not ever go, because they had no evidence, they could not. I had been covering Iraq at such a deep level for the CIA and the Pentagon, Defense Intelligence Agency, for so many years. They knew that if they dropped the charges, I would immediately be thrown into the pit and the fire, and the Congress would get in trouble. The White House would get in trouble. So that's why that was not done. And we had soldiers who were dying. And the people on the battlefield were terrified of the truth coming out, that the whole thing was a lie. And so so the accusations against me were blatantly false, fabricated, wild lies, completely wrong. Okay, now coming forward. Why were they afraid of me? Well, it turns out that this goes to the war on terrorism and the lies that they had told about 9/11, and how all of this fits in with the Iraqi government's efforts to cooperate with the United States prior to the 9/11 attack. I first learned, now I'm, okay, so does anybody have any questions about my arrest? Because now I'll go into the 9/11 stuff.
I can't think of anything.
Okay, now I'm going to go into the 9/11.
Wait, would you remind me? I came in late. When were you arrested?
March 2004.
Okay, thank you.
And I was held under indictment for 5 years. They refused to give me a trial. In order to justify refusing to give me a trial, I was declared not competent to stand trial, which was just absurd. And
How
then
long were you imprisoned?
I was in prison for 1 year, for 11 months.
Okay.
For 11 months. But I was held under indictment without a trial for 5 years. From March 2004 until 2009, 5 days before Obama's inauguration, they dropped the charges. And what's sad is that I've told this, I've shared this story so many times, and yet the lies, it's just they invent all new lies and put it into Wikipedia, and it is the most unreliable source. If I had hoped to have money to get to be able to fight like a lawsuit against Wikipedia for all of the lies that they've told, but I've never been able to get, and we change Wikipedia and it goes right back. But now I want to talk about the 9/11 stuff, because that's really what we're here for.
I did have one more question about your arrest. You were, as I understand, the second American arrested under the Patriot Act, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Jose Padilla was the first, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Miles has his hand up, Susan.
Hi, Miles.
Hi, Susan. Well, first of all, I've heard Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate also complain very vocally and emphatically about how corrupted Wikipedia is with respect to anything written about them. So you're not alone. I no longer support Wikipedia. I wasn't a big supporter, but they're always asking, every once in a while, asking for money. And given this track record of falsehoods.
Horrible. It's defamation.
Yeah. Now, a question is, were you, do you have connections, shared anecdotes with Scott Ritter, who was the weapons inspector back then? And, just before you go into it, of course, most of us know that the FBI has raided Scott Ritter recently, and who knows what they're trying to get on him.
I am very afraid for Scott Ritter.
Chat about that.
What happened to Scott Ritter and what he's been doing is very much what I was doing. I categorically deny ever receiving money from the Iraqis. But what Scott Ritter was accused of doing is speaking against the war in Ukraine, applying his intellect, applying his knowledge of weapons and the status of the war and the failure of the war, that it's not going the way Zelensky wants. And the justifications are not quite what Biden has been selling to the people to justify, and Lindsey Graham to justify these hundreds of billions of dollars. And that is what I was doing. I was saying, look, you're wrong. The Iraqis do this whole thing about weapons of mass destruction and ties to 9/11 are completely bogus. They're completely bogus. And we have they're completely bogus. We have yeah. So now I want to jump into why that is true, because I think that once you understand the timing and how it all works, how it all fits, then you'll understand why it's so outrageous to me that but what they're doing to Scott Ritter, he is not a spy. He's not spying for Russia, but they're trying to say that he's an agent of Russia because he is against the Ukraine war. And I was never an agent of the Iraqis. I just used my brain and the intellect and critical analysis of what I knew to be factual evidence to bring to attack the war. And I was involved in Iraqi pre-war intelligence. So here's what I want to say about the 9/11. I first learned of 9/11 from my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuse, in April of 2001. I had been covering the Iraqi embassy since the 90s, for 5 or 6 years. Since I'd covered the Iraqi embassy, I gave advance warning about the 1993 World Trade Center. And that is how I become invited. I was vetted by the FBI and the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. And then I was invited to do very serious counterterrorism work. I met Osama bin Laden. I don't think I was able to say that before, but now enough time has passed that I can tell you that I had met him. He was a psychopath. That is true, but he had nothing to, but I do not believe that he had anything to do with this attack. And he was
Who was the psychopath?
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah. He did not have anything to do with this attack. How could, and this was something that was done here in the United States. It was Saudi pilots that were allegedly flying in Florida, allegedly being trained. But how is it possible then that those Saudi pilots are alive today flying for Saudi Airlines? So it's obvious that there are obvious lies that just fall apart the minute you start poking at this thing. You can see that the lies start to collapse. I do not believe Osama bin Laden had anything to do with it. He certainly would not have had the power to wire the buildings. They were obviously wired. You know, whether you can and once you figure out that they've been bombed, the building has been wired with explosives, then you have to ask how someone in a cave in Afghanistan could have coordinated to deliver bomb materials into New York City and to put the bombs into the buildings. In fact, this is and this is all things you know, but I'm going to just stick with this, starting with the information that I had in April of 2001, 6 months before the attack. My CIA handler summoned me to his office, and he demanded that he had a message to take to the Iraqi government. And that's what I existed to do at that point. I was a back channel. I was already negotiating the return of the weapons inspectors to Baghdad, going very well. And the Iraqis understood that cooperation with anti-terrorism was vital to ending the sanctions, and that they would have done absolutely nothing to endanger the progress to end the sanctions. They were in a position of finally bringing an end to the hell that they had been experiencing since the 1990 attack. So this was like 10 years, 11 later, that the sanctions had been in place, and they wanted that this was the best opportunity to end the sanctions. So whenever I was dealing with the Iraqis, they were very congenial and supportive, and whatever we wanted, they were very clear we were going to get. So that my CIA handler told me, he said, I want you to go to New York. I want you to tell them that we have intelligence. This is April of 2001. George Bush has just been inaugurated in January of 2001. So this is 4 months after the inauguration of George Bush.
Susan, Gene has his hand raised. Do you,
Oh,
do you want questions saved to the end, or is
oh,
this?
interrupt me. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead, Gene.
Forgive me, I got to take you back just a little bit. Could you confirm or deny that Osama bin Laden is also this CIA asset, Tim Osman?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And he had, yes.
Thank you.
And he had been, and he was, yes. And as an asset, they would have known this is also very important. And it's, again, this is conspiracy. This is where they start saying conspiracy theory. Oh God, oh God. But all CIA assets are heavily watched. They know everything that you're doing at every time, at every moment that you're walking around. You're no longer operating in your own sphere, in your own lane, without anyone paying attention. And so the idea that Osama bin Laden would have just been off doing his own thing without anybody knowing about it is absurd and impossible. And that is why that's a very good question, a very important question, that he was an asset. And that meant that he had I was once asked how many people I thought were watching me. I said, oh, probably 3 or 4. He said, no, there are 11. There are 11 people. My phones were wiretapped by 4 governments: Britain, France, Israel, Egypt, and the United States. So all of any communications I had were being super managed, super overseen by every possible government on the planet who was an ally of the United States. And all of these people had a stake in making the 9/11 story go away. Okay. So what happens is I go to the Iraqi embassy in April of 2001, and and I say to them, we've heard information that there's going to be an attack. We'd like you to send a cable to Baghdad and let us know if you hear anything back. Let us know if you hear of anything. And they were very friendly. They were very positive. They said, oh, sure, we'll do that. No problem. So I went back, my CIA handler called me up. He said, so what did they say when you yelled at them? I said, well, I didn't have to yell at them. They're very excited about, cooperating with us and having these talks on the weapons inspections. And they've already they're our best source of intelligence on anti-terrorism going back a dozen years, because Saddam hates the radical fundamentalists. So he's always cooperative whenever we have to get information on terrorism. And they said they'd send the cable to Baghdad. This isn't going to be a problem. He said in April of 2001, I did not tell you to be nice to these people. I want you to go back to New York and deliver the message exactly as I have said. I want you to yell at these people and tell them that if they don't give us the damn intelligence they've got, then we're going to bomb if this attack goes off, we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Ages. We're going to bomb them harder than we've ever been hit. And this was pretty hard to explain to the Iraqis because they'd already been hit as hard as anybody could be at them. But you go back and tell them this originates at the highest levels of government, above the Secretary of State and above the director of the CIA. Now that is only 3 people. Above that, and as an asset, one of the things you have to do is you are communicating a message. It is not Susan Lindauer's foreign policy. It is the foreign policy of the government itself. So is this you're very precise. The message was above the Secretary of State and above the CIA director. Now that is only 3 people. That is the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, and Secretary of State Colin Powell. Those 3 individuals. And those 3 individuals at that point were saying, we know this attack is going to occur. You better deliver into any intelligence you come across. You better give it to Susan. You better turn it over to us, because if this attack goes on and you have not helped us stop it, we're going to bomb you back to the Stone Age harder than you've ever been hit. So I went back to New York in May of 2001. Now imagine if I was telling this to Congress, sworn under oath in hearings, which is what it should have been. this would have blown apart the entire justification for the war. The whole Bush White House would have, the whole Republican Party would have crashed down. The whole thing would have come down. The House of Cards would have come down. So I went back to the Iraqi government in May and back to the embassy. And I said, you know, I have to tell you, I was understating this threat, and I was understating the demands. I need you to resend this message with some clarity. And I want you to give them the facts of what's happening. And the diplomat was very courteous, very concerned. He said, well, Baghdad has already consented to allow the FBI to send a terrorism task force into Iraq with authorization to conduct terrorism investigations. And this went back to the bombing of the USS Cole in October of 2020. We had learned about the bombing of the USS Cole in advance from the Iraqi embassy. They had told me about 10 days before the attack that they had deported a Saudi national. All they could do was deport the guy to get him out of the country and then warn the United States. They did not want him anywhere near Iraq when this went down, that there was going to be a bombing of a US military vessel in the port of Aden in Yemen. And it was because Osama bin Laden was trying to move his Al-Qaeda forces from Somalia across the water to Yemen so that he could stage attacks on the Saudi oil fields. Yemen being a scrabble poor country, and the next door neighbor impoverished, the people's very jealous of the Saudi oil fields, and they wanted to do this. So they gave me the advance warning about the October 2020 attack on the bombing of the USS Cole. And after that, the reason that they had given for why they could not arrest the guy was that he was a Saudi national, and it was impossible for the Iraq government ever to arrest any foreign, it was impossible to make an arrest of a Saudi national by the Baghdad government. All they could do was deport him, and it would have been impossible to arrest him. So they had alerted us. So immediately the FBI and the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency had jumped on Iraq's impotence to handle terrorism. And they had demanded in December of 2020, when the first talks were beginning on the weapons inspections, there was a sidebar already in December 2020 saying that they wanted the FBI or Scotland Yard or Interpol had to be legitimate law enforcement, not intelligence, not the CIA, not MI6. It had to be legitimate law enforcement. Wanted to set up a terrorism task force inside Iraq with authority to conduct investigations, interview witnesses, and make arrests. And this was something that the Iraqis agreed to by January, February of 2001. So the first thing that George Bush has on his plate as he is sworn into office, the Iraqis had already consented to invite the weapons inspectors back into country. And at the same time, they had already invited in tandem the FBI to send a terrorism task force into the country. Now, this is a huge, if you're looking at my arrest, the damage that was done to me, to my reputation, all the accusations against me, all the lies that they've told, go back to this deep desire to hide this factual knowledge from the people. Because when I went back in May 2001, and I said, look, I understated the message. You've always been, Iraq has always cooperated with us on terrorism, and we know that you're gonna, I know you're gonna cooperate with us, but we have a new president and I need you to be very stern about this. He said, well, absolutely, I will send that message to Baghdad. And Baghdad has already invited the FBI to send a terrorism task force into Iraq with authority to make these investigations and interview witnesses and make arrests if necessary. And I want you to go back to Washington, tell them I will immediately accept any FBI team that wants a visa to go into Iraq. Now, this is May of 2001. They said, if you think there's going to be we want to get these sanctions off, and we're going to cooperate to the maximum to get that done. And so what you do is you go back to Washington and you deliver our message that all they have to do is send any FBI team to our embassy. And I will have, the diplomat said, I will have instructions here that I am to be interrupted at any meeting whatsoever. They're to pull me out of that meeting. I will come racing back to the embassy. I can be back here in 10 minutes. Nothing will get in the way. That is the highest priority. And I will grant them a visa immediately to enter Baghdad so that the FBI can investigate this. Whatever you're hearing about this so-called terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York City, by God, that's down the street. We don't want that to happen. That would be a disaster. Of course, we're going to cooperate. So you just, I'll tell my embassy staff that anytime the FBI shows up here, I will be interrupted right back. We will grant them a visa. They can be in Baghdad in 24 hours. Okay, 24 hours they can be in Baghdad. This is not a problem. So that is May of 2001. I go back to Washington. I deliver that message. That is not what George Bush and Dick Cheney and Colin Powell and John McCain wanted to hear. They wanted to hear sputterings of criticisms. We won't comply. You can't make us do this. And that is not what happened. I see somebody with their hand raised.
Yeah, could you just remind me, what was your job title?
I was a CIA and Defense Intelligence asset working in counterterrorism. It was totally black ops. It was completely black ops. It was secret, top presidential level secrecy.
You weren't in a.
I had been working for Congress at the time.
An embassy.
I was working for Congress at the time, and part of the time I was a journalist. But most of what I did was anti-terrorism, and I did it at the real level. I also negotiated the Lockerbie trial with Libya, the handover of the 2 Libyans. But again, I never received money from Libya. I was never spying for Libya or Iraq or any government at all. I was spying for the United States.
Do you have formal education in some?
I went to Smith College, graduated from Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I have a master's degree in public policy from the London School of Economics. So that I was recruited on the basis of my advance warning about the 1993 World Trade Center attack.
And just quickly, there's a name I remember from back then. Hans Blix was a weapons.
Yes.
In charge of weapons inspection. Do you know his story, what his timeline is? Was he in Iraq prior?
Well, they had been thrown out of Iraq in December of 1998.
Okay, so it was
the Iraqis had protested that the United States was belligerent. They were definitely belligerent. They were definitely aggressive and exceeded the maxim, that exceeded the mission of the United Nations. That is factually true. There was no possibility of weapons in Iraq, but they were determined never to let go of the sanctions. And it begs the question of why they had done this all these years. there had to be a second war. As far as they were concerned, they would never let it go as long as Saddam Hussein was in power. And the Iraqi people had no, Saddam was making their country work. And I never shared that hatred of Saddam. I've never understood. I think that it was a foolish thing to hate this man. It was not deserved. He wanted to be an ally of the United States. He correctly identified that Iran would rise as a global power unless Iraq was there to hold them back. So he saw that he was correct in that point, that a weakened Iraq would embolden the Iranian regime, which would bring radical fundamentalism throughout the Middle East. And that is exactly what happened. So it was bewildering that we were attacking Iraq when they were a bulwark against the Iranian government, frankly.
Thank you.
So I see another hand.
Yeah, Susan, are you in contact with Scott Ritter? Do you know him personally?
It's been years since I spoke with him. It's been several years. I have not spoken with him recently.
And were you, when he came out and said there was no weapons of mass destruction, was that when you were in your working?
Yeah,
for the
that was when we were both speaking against the war. We were both speaking out against the war. And you will recall that they went after Scott Ritter for some kind of garbage.
They attacked his marriage or something, as I recall.
They got him for like some underage
Girl, yeah.
solicitation, and they've taken him on a couple of times.
Right.
They've taken him on a couple of times.
He's a brilliant guy. I listen to him all the time.
Yeah, he is. He's brilliant. And the sad thing is that there's so much. I would say he's in great danger of being arrested right now. I really do think that he's in, not because of anything he's done that is criminal, but because this is how they are weaponizing our court system to prosecute anyone who criticizes their foreign policy. And they're saying that if you're not defending Joe Biden, then you must be a foreign agent. And that's absolutely not true. It's ridiculously not true. When I was indicted, my alias was Symbol Susan. So what they did was they said it was Susan Lindauer, aka Symbol Susan. And that was a message to all the other intelligence people. If you speak against this war, if you speak about what's happening between anti-terrorism and the lies about 9/11 and how the whole Iraq war has been the phony justifications, look what we're doing to her. We will do the same thing to you. And that was important.
Example of you.
Yeah, they're making an example of me.
Greg has his hand up.
Yeah. I was wondering, David Red Griffin wrote a book in which he said that Osama bin Laden died of natural causes. He was not dropped in the Indian Ocean by the U.S. military. Do you subscribe to that too?
I do subscribe to that. I think that if they had the body of Osama bin Laden for real, they would have brought it back and had him identified by a family member. Like they would, he has family member who are still, here's a good story, a good example of this. The Carlyle Group, while I was under indictment, this goes to your question. It'll make sense in just a second. While I was under indictment, I was invited to do some work at the Carlyle Group and in Washington, D.C., which does financial investments. And I was told by someone that I had been specially requested and I was not to bring a camera. I was not allowed to take any photographs of it. But they showed me that Osama bin Laden, the bin Laden family, had invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the Carlyle Group, and they were heavily interconnected, financially intertwined. And so, and like, 20 million, the smallest investment amount was $20 million. So 20 million in this emerging amount in Vietnam, 20 million in this emerging amount in Belize, 20 million in this in Ukraine, here, there, all over the place. And I was able to look at those documents eyes only. And it was very clear that the bin Laden family had not been ostracized politically, but that they were being sort of rewarded with preferential investments. And this was very incestuous. So while they had, trashed Osama, his reputation, which, the Osama, the bin Laden family itself was heavily interconnected with the Bush family. And the James Baker was the founder of the Carlyle Group. So it's just worth considering that if they had actually killed Osama bin Laden, coming back to your question, if they'd actually killed him, they could have brought him back to Washington, called in any of his family member, and had a formal presentation saying, yes, we identify that family member. That's the one. He's dead. It's over. And that's not what they did. They dumped his body in the water. And that's not how Islam, there's nothing in Islam that would require them to do that. And frankly, when has the West ever cared how did they dispose of an Islamic terrorist? When have they ever cared about, sensitivities to Islam? It's preposterous. They had the wrong guy. I believe that, given as sick as he was, and he had been coming into Washington for treatment, flying internationally, but he was already so sick, I don't believe he could have lived that long. So I do.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions up to this point? Okay, so then the next thing that happens is throughout the summer. So the first thing is that in April and May, I present this to the Iraqi government. The Iraqi embassy says, we will absolutely cooperate. We are going to keep this thing. We want to make sure that there's maximum cooperation on this advanced investigation of this, and we'll grant the FBI special visa privileges to come into the country. They can run whatever investigation they need to do right here in Baghdad. We're happy to cooperate. And the United States took no action at all. In June and July and August, I was, my CIA handler said, go back and ask him again. Have they got anything they can give us? I was like, no, I did. And I went back to the embassy. I said, have you heard anything? They're like, no. We've already invited the FBI to come in. All of our sources circle back to you. So we're not hearing from any other source that this attack is going to occur. You, Susan, are the source of the intelligence. This is coming out of Washington. It's coming out of the CIA. But there's no other source over here in the Arab world that is repeating this story, that is raising this issue anywhere else except through you. Which, so this was, June, July. On August 2nd, on August 2nd, we had an event. And that was the day that Robert Mueller, we all know Robert Mueller from the ridiculous Trump investigation. Whatever you think of Trump, the whole Russiagate was a lie, okay? But Robert Mueller was going to be named the FBI director. And so he was having a confirmation on Capitol Hill on August 2nd. And that is why I know the precise date of all these things. And I spoke with my CIA handler, and we were all gabbing about this attack that was going to happen. And it was very clear. It involved airplane hijackings and a strike on the World Trade Center as a known target. And I said, you know, and so my CIA handler says to me, Richard Fuse, Susan, do you think it's possible that this attack will go on, that there will be no FBI director when this attack occurs? And I was like, God, do you think it's that soon? Do you think it's that soon? And he's like, yeah, I think the attack is imminent. We're expecting this attack, you know, the end of August, early September. Now, I told friends who were civilians this information. So this was confirmed under oath, sworn under oath in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan, 1,000 feet from where the World Trade Center once stood. The New York Times was present at the hearing when the testimony was taking place. The New York Times refused to report it. They instead said the lead sentence on the hearing story was she stuck her tongue out at the judge. Oh my! They just listened to. I think I flipped him off. I think I went, you son of a bitch. I think that's what I really did. But they said I stuck my tongue out at the lead sentence, not bombshell testimony today. Susan Lindauer told private citizens about the 9/11 attack a month in the spring and summer of 2001. They knew it was coming. None of that. She stuck her tongue out at the prosecutor. I was like, this is the New York Times. Absolute garbage. Total invention to protect the White House and to protect lies on Capitol Hill. So, you know, but the real story was that on August 2nd, that was when my internal clock begins to roll for real. Because I told my CIA handler that I said, there's never been a terrorism case that Robert Mueller did not throw for the politicians. And we're like, he can't possibly do that in this case because it's going to be so terrible, you know. And Richard Fuse was more worried that the attack would occur prior to the Senate vote to confirm the nomination, because it was so close that it would happen during the recess while there was no FBI director to deal with the issue. That's how close it was. So I said, look, Richard, I'm going to go to New York one more time. I'm going to go up to New York one more time. And this was August 2nd was a Thursday. August 4th, I went up to New York and I spoke with diplomats and I said, do you have anything? And Richard Fuse said, any fragment of intelligence involving airplane hijackings and a bombing, anything on the World Trade Center, anything at all. Don't even try to verify it. Don't try to clarify what it is. Just any scrap or fragment of intelligence that I can take to the CIA. Give it to me, Susie. And I said, okay, I'm going to run up to New York. He said, do that. And this will be the last trip you make up to New York until after the attack is finished. We don't want you going back again because we know the attack is imminent. We're expecting mass casualties, and you're going to go up to New York. You're going to talk to these people. You're going to bring down anything they've got at all, and we're going to try to stop the attack. But this will be your last trip until after the attack is over. And so I told my civilian friends that they should stay out of New York in late August, early September, because that's when the attack was going to happen. And They lived in Connecticut. They regularly went up to Broadway shows and the museums and all the nightlife of New York, went out for dinner in New York City, went out up, once a week they went up. And they literally stayed out of the city throughout the month of August and the first half of September because I told them to. And then after the attack, they're like, oh my God, there really was an attack. You weren't kidding. Oh God. But at the time they thought I was being hysterical. They thought that I was being extremely paranoid, that this attack would never really happen, but Susie says so we're going to do what she says. But they had talked about it, and they were until after the fact, they were like, oh God, this is real. This really is real. And it was quite so he was emphatic and very precise about his in testimony on the Southern District of New York, under oath, sworn, Park Godfrey, sworn under oath, very precise and meticulous, thoughtful. He is not a 9/11 truther. He's a professor of computer science, mathematician, physics, log algorithms, calculus problems are his sport. He loves calculus problems. He is not somebody who's a politician or a conspiracy theorist. Not at all. I don't think it was good for his career that he was associated with me and had, I think the aftermath for him, his failing was that he told the truth. He was like, I'm not going to lie to protect any politician. I'm going to tell you, she absolutely gave this 9/11 warning to my family. And we changed our behavior because of what Susan was so adamant that this was going to happen. I came back from New York. The Iraqis threw up their hands August 4th. So we don't know anything about this attack. It's all coming to you. And then on August 6th, which was a Monday, I went to my CIA handler. I sat down with him in his office in Great Falls, Virginia, sat down and I said, what are we going to do? We have to do something. We both think this attack is imminent. We both are worried that there's not going to be an FBI director and that that this may occur even before the Senate confirms his nomination in a vote. And what are we going to do? So I had been given a phone number for the Attorney General, John Ashcroft. Now, in fact, I'd had this phone number for the office of the Attorney General through going back, 6 or 7 years. I had never used this phone number before, ever. And it was only to be used if I discovered intelligence about a terrorism attack and I was not able to reach my CIA handler or my defense intelligence handler. And therefore, there was a danger that the attack might go forward without proper warning through channels. I could not use my channels to get the intelligence to the top of the government. And then I was supposed to use that. So for the first and only time, that is, I talked to Richard Fuse on Monday. On Tuesday or Wednesday, that would be Tuesday, August 7th, or Wednesday, August 8th, I telephoned the office of Attorney General John Ashcroft. And I say to him this message, which we had been I'd worked out with my CIA handler on the 6th. I said, I want you to know, we are asking for an emergency broadcast alert across all federal agencies. We are seeking any fragment of intelligence involving airplane hijackings and a strike on airplane hijackings and or bombings and a strike on the World Trade Center as a known target. Now, in the aftermath, we all know the building was bombed. It was wired for explosives. So don't get worried about. Don't get distracted by that. I understand that of what a false flag is, and I understand the optics. This was, but this is what. But on August 8th, we'll come to that in a minute. On August 8th, that was the message that I gave the Attorney General's office. We're seeking any fragment of intelligence from any source. We need it to be transferred back to us. And the Attorney General's secretary, I had been told the person that received the phone call could look across the room and lay eyes on the Attorney General. And that person gave me the number of the Office of Counterterrorism, said, repeat this message that you just gave me directly to the person who answers this phone call. And they did this. This message triggers Colleen Rowley's crowd in the FBI offices in Minnesota. And they received notice from the Attorney General's office that there's something going on, and they have already scouted this oh God, what is his name? The 19th hijacker. They've stopped somebody. God, his name escapes me for a moment, but they had taken his phone, they'd arrested him, and they wanted the Attorney General's permission to open his hardware, open up his laptop, open up his cell phone to look at whatever he's been doing. And the Attorney General says, no, you can't. Okay, this is the 19th hijacker, which is a cover for the attack. What I think happened, and I think we can all see what happened, the buildings were wired for explosives, and it's a magician's trick. It is very much a magician's trick. They needed a trigger that would make it look like it's like all eyes would be on the left hand when the real action would be on the right hand. But they needed an optical illusion. They needed a story to tell to persuade the American people that this enormous terrorist attack had occurred, and that it would allow him, that it would be a Pearl Harbor that would empower the Bush White House to attack Iraq and start the war that George Bush had been desperately trying to get all those years, that he thought he was going to finish Daddy's war. And so that's what this is all about.
Miles has his hand raised.
Miles, I see your hand.
Okay. It's fascinating. I'm trying.
But I just want to say,
Go ahead.
I absolutely believe the buildings were bombed. I believe that I do not believe for a second that airplanes brought down the entire World Trade Center. That is against the laws of physics. This is one of the things that confounds confounding the truth is one of the best things they do. And it's amazing to me that anybody would believe this. They heard the bombs with their own ears. The firefighters and the firefighters inside the building heard the bombs exploding. They were all racing to get out. We know that there was raw liquid sulfate. I think it was a sulfate. Richard Gage has the science behind him to know it was a thermo. I do believe it was involved a couple of different types of bombs, that it was a sulfate bomb. It was also probably a mini thermonuke bomb in the basement to take out because the rivers of ore, of iron, flooded the basement and fires continued for months. This just doesn't happen if a building topples down. That is the work of a specific type of a thermosulfate bomb. And again, you should always look at the science. What does the science tell you about the type of bomb? I'm not going to tell you that. What I can tell you is that the crime had every crime has three components. It requires motive, an opportunity. Okay, and without motive, the motive was to get the United States into war. They had to overcome enormous public resistance to this. I believe that we are now in a situation where there could be another attack on New York City because they're going to want to try to get us into Ukraine. I do not believe that they can fight Russia alone without US soldiers on the ground. And that I think that we're in grave danger of having another 9/11 attack, another 9/11 style attack. And it will probably happen within months. I wouldn't be surprised if given that Zelensky and Ukraine are failing and falling down, that this will be done in the first 6 months, first 90 days to 6 months of a second Trump presidency, whether it's Trump or Kamala. They're going to need to get the United States into that war, and that's how they're going to do it. And they'll have a new attack on New York City. And they'd be happier if Kamala's involved. Kamala Harris is running the White House because she's easier to control than Trump. Okay, so I think they hate Vance because Vance is opposed to the Iraq War, opposed to financing Ukraine, and I think that if the economy is not doing great the way that they think it is, we are bankrupt, our debts are out of control, Europe is in trouble, and they want the United States. They're going to push very hard to get the next White House to go into Ukraine, and that's when you're going to see a new attack. And I think it will happen very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen by March or April. Okay, back to you. Back to your question. Sorry.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about, what I'd like to know is the concept of a Black Ops CIA asset. How is it that you have the, I guess they say, bona fides to connect with Iraqi officials or Iraqi?
That's a very good question.
Like, do you have?
It was because I gave advance warning about the first World Trade Center attack in 1993. My CIA handler had been based in Beirut in the 1980s, and he was. We did Lockerbie in Libya. Lockerbie was another intelligence cover-up of heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. And Pan Am 103 was a real bombing of they were killing off the team of defense intelligence agents going back to Washington to report on the CIA's role in heroin trafficking. And they were killing off all the people involved in that operation. And so I was involved in negotiating in going to the Libyans and persuading Libya to have the weapons, to have the Lockerbie trial and to turn over their 2 men for the Lockerbie trial. And I was going to them saying, look, we know they're innocent. We know that the families of Lockerbie families, Pan Am 103, cannot accept that they're innocent. They're going to have to see the evidence or lack thereof in a trial. And that is how I'm doing all of this anti-terrorism work. So it starts with the first World Trade Center. It goes to Libya. When I'm dealing with Libya, they're like, go ahead. And I approached the Iraqi government and got everything, and the Iraqi embassy.
The Iraqis knew you were a CIA asset.
They all knew because of Richard Fuse.
Okay.
They knew because of Richard Fuse, so it was out in the open because everyone had known that Richard Fuse was a CIA asset, and yeah,
Asset handler.
he was my case officer, but he had been a non-official cover in Syria and Lebanon in the 1980s.
You never needed to have a business card that said I'm CIA.
Well, no, he was a knock, so he had a non-official cover, which was like he ran a company for Saudi Arabia in with Aramco, one of the Saudi Arabia companies.
Right.
So they had figured out that he was CIA, and he was known.
Gene did have his hand raised. Do you still have a question, Gene?
No, I was clapping my hands when she said something great about the towers coming down, not by planes.
Yeah, it's not by, some people get confused and because of the focus on the advance warning, what part of it was that they were building the story. Okay, they're building a story. They're laying the foundation for the story, which is that planes are going to strike the World Trade Center, and that in itself will cause the mass casualties. Now, in advance time, in lead time, we always said that there would be, the planes would hold a miniature nuclear device, so that it would be the mini nuke that would trigger the mass casualties when the plane went off. But we always, but it's a magician's trick. It is a magician's trick that all eyes are on the left hand, which is the airplane striking the World Trade Center, but the real action is what the right hand is doing. And the people required a visual of the left hand, because so that the people could understand how the story that they were telling required airplanes to strike the World Trade Center. So there were some airplanes, but they may have been drones. But we didn't know about drones back then. I would say they were probably drones, frankly.
Well, there's also the thought of them being guided.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
September 8th, they're definitely, the International Center for 9/11 Justice is having a webinar on that.
Okay, yeah. They could have been guided there. They could have, yeah. But it's, as we all know, the Saudi pilots who were named as hijackers, several of them are now flying airplanes for Saudi National Airlines.
Yeah, and how could that be if
Exactly. If they all died, and how is it possible that the Pentagon, the plane that allegedly struck the Pentagon, went on to land, went on to be decommissioned several years later? And how could it be possible that the Shanksville plane that allegedly hit the mine shaft in Shanksville went on to land successfully, and the mayor of the town was there to greet the airplane and said, "No, it's," and they show the airplane, they show people disembarking from the airplane. "No, it landed safely. Don't worry, everybody." And then, oops, that story disappears quickly.
Wow.
But again, it goes to, I have to say that I wear my, I think we're coming up to the, am I past my?
No, we're going to 8 o'clock. Is that okay?
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
8 o'clock Eastern, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, sorry that I've overtaken your time, but
Oh, you have.
but they're so, I really do believe that we are in a position now where there will be another attack. I really do believe that they have to have, in order to get into Ukraine, the United States economy, you may, I don't know who of you like Trump and who of you like Kamala. All of you may hate Israel, you may support Israel, you may like Kamala, you may not like Kamala, you may, whatever your politics is. These people, this is a war party. The United States is losing ground. Biden has been a terrible president on the international front. Zelensky cannot fight the war himself. He requires US soldiers to join him. And the way that they will move if they don't move quickly, then they're going to lose this war. The war party cannot give this up. And the way that they're going to do this will be to have a new 9/11 attack, a new false flag attack. It won't be on the World Trade Center this time, but it may involve, I wouldn't be surprised, some kind of mini nuke explosion in Manhattan that they will blame on Russia, and they will use the attack to mobilize US soldiers to go into Europe. And that is, I think that this is something that will become very important in that the 9/11 story, and I would challenge you all that if I'm right, that I would love to have an event with the 9/11 groups all together in Boston, somewhere, Boston, Washington, D.C., New York, whenever, because I want to be able to I want to remind everybody of what happened in the Iraq War, using 9/11 to get into the Iraq War. And I want to tell everybody that they're using this new attack to get into Ukraine, and that they're being manipulated like we were before. And
Well, in recent months, they've been ramping up military recruitments and making sure people register and pushing for, girls, women to be, to register.
it's-
But why do you think they'd go for New York again, not say DC?
well, because Congress is in DC. New York is a reliable blue state, reliable blue city filled with Jewish people, which means that they will be more sympathetic to starting a war, to going into a war situation. I think that the Zionists are very rapidly, they're reliable for pushing to get the United States into military actions.
But even on
Whether
9/11,
you like Israel or not, the Israeli Zionists are reliable for the war party. And I think that New York, they will not hit Washington, D.C. They won't. It would make sense if they did, but they won't, because of Congress and because of the White House and the State Department and the Justice Department. They need a head on the beast has to have a head in order to mobilize and make decisions for everyone. To
well,
get
let's keep also in
I will tell you, I really think that they're going to do it again. I really think so.
well, it definitely seems plausible. But even on 9/11, the ramp up for war talk didn't occur until the Pentagon was hit. The Pentagon was the real attack.
Yeah.
That was an attack on the United States, not I shouldn't say just a terrorist attack, but attack on the United States. So that's why I think DC would be the more likely target for the second.
Well, we'll see. Time will tell if I'm right or not.
But you don't have any specific intelligence.
No,
You
no,
did.
I have no, just a gut
Yeah.
that they did.
Susan, Gene has his hand up.
Okay.
Dog.
I got a juicy one. I have it queued up, but I'll just keep it short if you guys want. I asked Susan, I asked you on Richard and Gail probably over a year ago now. Do you have a dead man's switch? And you laughed, and then you said jokingly, I do know where the $2.3 trillion is.
Yes.
Wondering if you could tell us any more on that.
Oh, I could. Gene, that's a very good question. I am, after my fight with over Iraqi pre-war intelligence, and after the end of my arrest, and my case had been dropped, and I'd already published my book, the Pentagon came to me and they asked me to hunt out the $2.3 trillion. And I have done that. The money was stolen by a federal inmate who's been locked up in prison since 1999. And he's getting out of prison next year. He is actually a Chinese agent, and he is going to he has vowed, he's sworn for 20 years, 25 years, that he will hand over that money to China. China is going to use this as financing for the BRICS parallel banking system. And gold stolen by this man. He also, he used to supermanage the black budgets for the CIA and the Pentagon. And while doing that, he also moved the gold out of the World Trade Center. And so we have also speculated that the 9/11 attack, he moved that gold out in 1999, and it may be that part of the 2001 attack was a cover. The 9/11 attack was a cover for that theft, so that they would not have to disclose that the gold had been, Germany's gold had been stolen by this gentleman who is now a federal inmate. But all of the gold is going to be turned over to China and BRICS for the gold-backed currency of BRICS. And the combination of the gold, which will be 25 megatons of gold for BRICS, plus the 2.3 trillion, which was used to launch a cyber theft of targeting US banks and US corporations, sorry, not US banks, US corporations and Japanese corporations in Asia. And if we were to get that, I have tried to get this back. I have tried to get this back, and the Joe Biden White House has refused to do it. And the prison inmate is getting released in June of next year. So we're on a basis. We're on
Record
a
that somewhere and put it in a lockbox and send it to some friends.
Yeah, seriously.
Wow.
So we have that, but there's a lot of we could have got this money back. One of the reasons that I am so heavily censored today is that they're hiding that intelligence from the people. And why would you want to give so again, the war party, this is a global thing. It's bigger than the United States. It is the Bilderberg crowd. It is what we used to call the Illuminati crowd. It is the European globalists who are transnationalists, who are not thinking about what is good for the United States. They don't care about the United States at all, as far as I can tell. They are looking at this from how to control the world, how to keep profits for themselves. And so, so yeah, that is my dead man switch. They can't kill me until they get that money back. And they want to get the money back, but they also are, there's globalist interventions going on. So I don't know. Nobody, if for a while they did not want Trump to realize the Democrats and the Democrats and Republicans are really a uniparty. They're two halves of, like you see the George Bush, Dick Cheney crowd endorsing Kamala Harris. They're globalists. And so they're looking for whatever's going to benefit the globalists, not what's going to benefit the United States. And this is important. So
Thank you, Susan. God bless you and be safe.
okay. Well, listen, you guys, thank you for having me tonight.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. That was very informative.
Yes, thank you. I'm so blown away with everything you have to say. I have one last question, though.
Sure.
The Mossad connection.
The Mossad connection, yes. They were at the very first, there was a Mossad connection. First of all, let's just say this. Israel knew the most about the war. There have been the war, excuse me, the attack. On the morning of 9/11, my CIA handler, I was at the post office. It's one of those events where you remember where you were when you first heard about the attack. And I was at the post office, and they said a pilot had just committed suicide by flying an airplane into the World Trade Center. And I was like, oh, it's happening. And I ran home, turned on the television, and my CIA handler and I got on the phone, yelling to each other, telling the people, don't go back in the building. Don't go back in the building. It's going to blow up. There's going to be an explosion. And my CIA handler said something to me. He said, how often do you think a man and a woman, how often do you think that a car accident that's happening very rapidly, that somebody is queued up with a video camera ready to capture the exact moment that the crash occurs? He said, it never happens. If you have a camera, your arms are whipping around and the picture is blurry. And this is before cell phones, of course, but this is before cell phones that were on the scene to capture things. And like, you get your cell phone out and you start taping something. But even then, it's your arms are moving around, and the picture is blurry and out of focus. But this picture was cleaned. And it just so happened that a man and a woman were standing on Manhattan, and they watched the airplane fly across the water, fly into the World Trade Center, and they got the whole thing. And it just so happened that they caught it on camera, and somehow magically, they beamed at the moment that it was happening, they beamed the photograph on a video satellite to the President of the United States, George Bush. Now, you've all heard this story before, but listen to how incongruous this is. George Bush said in his first statement after the attack, first public statement, the President of the United States says, I saw the attack before I went in to the elementary school to read the children's story. And when they told me about the attack, before I went into the classroom, I was told about the first attack. And I said to myself, golly, that must be a really lousy pilot, because I used to fly during the war. And so they had the attack had occurred at 9:15 in the morning, and they're saying that he had seen the attack. George Bush says, I saw the first plane fly into the World Trade Center. And he uses the word sees it. I saw it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that the only way that would be possible is if this video footage that was shot by the Mossad couple was beamed in advance, was already set up on a live feed to the hotel where the president was staying. And it was all set up in advance so that they could watch it on camera as it was taking place. And then he could go to the classroom and talk about it. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to make the statement that he made. Right. Now, on the morning of that attack, not knowing that the President of the United States had seen the video, my CIA handler said, but my CIA handler had now the attack had occurred 5 minutes before. Literally, I had been at the post office, jump in my car, drive home, turn on the TV, call my CIA handler. The attack has been maybe 7 minutes. So this is before, this is before the first attack. Excuse me, it's after the first attack, but before the second attack, before the first plane strikes the World Trade. Excuse me, sorry. No, sorry. It is after the first plane has struck the World Trade Center, but before the second plane has struck the World Trade Center. So far at this point, there's only been one airplane. And my CIA handler already knows that there is a video and the president of the United States has seen it. Okay, he's telling me there is a video. A man and a woman have shot a video, and somehow, before the second plane has even struck the building, the president of the United States has already seen the video. And that is confirmed by the fact what he says before he goes into the class, that when his first comment about when he comes out of the classroom is, golly gee, I thought when, I saw that airplane fly into the world. I saw the first pilot fly into the World Trade Center, and I thought he was a really lousy pilot. Now, right there, they've exposed themselves, but the cognitive dissonance is so great that you can't even the 9/11 truth community has trouble understanding that the president of the United States has just confessed that he saw the video. He says, I saw the plane before I went into the classroom. That is his immediate response in his unscripted moment. He's so shocked by what is happening. He blurts it out. He comes out of the classroom and he says, they're like, Mr. President, did you hear about this? Yes, I saw the airplane. I saw the first plane crash into the building because he's been in the classroom. He couldn't have seen the second one. When I saw the first plane, I said to myself, oh my God, that's a terrible pilot. Because I used to fly airplanes. Right there, you have them that they knew in advance this was happening. Right there, it's done. And my CIA handler says, how often do you think, and before the second plane crashes into the building, he says to me on the phone, how often do you think a man and woman are queued up on a street corner with a video camera to film a car accident? It never happens. And he says to me, these were Mossad agents. And I said to him, you mean to tell me that we have been waiting for this attack and the Israelis knew the entire time and they didn't tell us? Those dirty bastards, except I used very colorful language. And he said, and he hung up the phone on me. And I called him back. And he said, Susan, we must never discuss this again.
Wow.
So we must never discuss this again.
So
And
has that couple been identified?
no, but we know about the dancing Israelis and
Right. But
we'll never know their names. I think that we have to understand that the people who did this, we're never going to, it is enough for us to know that they have done it. And it is enough for us to know that it is a conspiracy, but we're never, it's like, who is the second shooter from the grassy knoll in the Kennedy case?
Right.
Well,
thank you, Susan, for very enlightening. We could go on for another hour, I think. I'd like to have you back sometime.
well, if this
second half.
yeah, well, you know what, if there is an attack, if I'm right, after the attack that will happen,
I hope you're wrong.
I hope I'm wrong, but if I am right, then I hope that you will maybe coordinate a meeting with all the 9/11 people and we'll get the message out, because we have to, that this is a false flag. It is exactly what they did with 9/11 in Iraq.
Right.
And I hope that that we can get something so that we can stop World War III, because this would be a trigger for World War III.
Are you in an undisclosed location?
Nope. They know exactly where I am, and they control me by, I'm not allowed on Twitter. Elon Musk, has opened up Twitter for everybody except me. I'm one of the very few people who's not allowed to have an account there.
Yeah.
And so much for free speech. But thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so we're gonna stop recording. It's been a delight, and want to remind everybody, if you haven't read Extreme Prejudice yet, please get yourself a copy and read it, or get the audiobook and listen to it. It's extremely enlightening, and as
I never, and everybody, I never took money from the Iraqis or the Libyans. I never spied for anybody. I was alibied. I was never incompetent to stand trial. They refused to give me a trial because they would have to go into court and say that there was no evidence to convict me. And they were determined never to be exposed on that level. So.
And I think everything you've enlightened us about is clear evidence of not only foreknowledge, but cover up of that foreknowledge, and the opportunity to allow all these multiple methods into the building. So complicity, absolute complicity.
Yes.
And I think we're all pretty clear on that at this point.
It's a magician's trick. All eyes are left hand when the right hand is where the action is.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
For the rest of the group, we'll